circular economy. My name is Antonia Grozdanova, and I am part of Impact Institute. I am here today with my colleagues to talk to you about resources use on your balance sheet and how you can respond to the recently adopted by the EU Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, and what the implications of this might be for you as a professional working on accelerating the circular economy. So what are we going to talk about today? First of all, we will tell you a little bit more about who we are and what we do, and then we will zoom into the circular economy and why you should think about this in the context of impact. Then we will move on to circularity and how you should think about this within the implications of the CSRD directive for you. Finally, we will talk about how you, as a professional, can start reporting on CSRD and how you can learn more about it. Please keep in mind that we also have some time for questions and answers in the end, so make sure to put these in the chat, and we'll make sure to come back to them. So let's wait no more. Who are we and what we do? As I mentioned, my name is Antonia Grozdanova. I am the Student Success Coach within Impact Institute. And I'm here today with my colleagues Reinier, Head of Research within Impact Institute, and Michel, who is the Director and Co-founder. And if you are active on LinkedIn, maybe you have already seen him and interacted with him. And we would love to know, Michel, if you can tell us a little more about what we do within Impact Institute.
Thank you so much, Antonia. And it's so exciting to sit in front of you today and talk about the CSRD in the context of circular economy and resource use. Impact Institute is an impact enterprise that aims to accelerate an economy in which work, entrepreneurship, innovation and technology enhance well-being for all. That includes protecting and respecting human rights, but also achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, the circular economy, and mitigating climate disaster and biodiversity disaster. So it's really about how can businesses and financial institutions safeguard well-being. We work all over the world, from Singapore to Sao Paulo, but also obviously in the Netherlands. ABN AMRO is one of our, I can say clients, but also partners in this endeavor. And we believe that for the impact economy, there's certain key requirements. First of all, that you have the information, data, to steer towards an impact that is positive for society. Second, the tools, software to implement that at scale. Third, the support to professionals, empowering professionals through advisory. And finally, the literacy. We really believe that professionals need to master the language of impact to actually make a transition in food, finance, energy, or whatever sector towards a more sustainable economy. So understanding what it is about. And that's obviously also what we are about today. The new regulation and really mastering what's in it to make sure that you make a rational choice to actually accelerate sustainability. Next slide. We have a framework developed with Harvard Business School and the Impact Economy Foundation to systematically address impacts. And that is basically, on the one hand, underpinned by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, so really respecting and protecting the dignity of nature and of people. And on the other hand, the concept of welfare, so basically happiness. How can we accelerate happiness? And that is underpinning our work. And the nice thing is that with that as an end game, you can address regulations such as the CSRD, also upcoming CSDD, which is more on due diligence, but also in particular, for example, circular economy requirements. It's actually a really nice framework to, for example, assess your materiality, to go in depth into resource use and circular economy principles. And we've applied that with many organizations, as you can see on the screen already. And yeah, we are very excited to talk more about it. Next slide. Education in particular, we believe, as I said, you know, we are all educated with almost excellence in finance, but the impact language is lacking. Natural, social, human effects, really having a profound and accurate estimation of what for example, the projected consequences are of investment decisions for social, natural, and human capital is something that not many professionals can express. And we believe, therefore, education is so important. So we have already educated 300 professionals, and we aim to have, at the end of 2030, 1 million impact professionals educated in this. And this may sound crazy, but it's needed. It's really needed because, you know, how can we alleviate poverty in the context of the Sustainable Development Goals if we don't even know what poverty is, what living wages are, how to assess that in the value chains of our companies. So really, we believe it's necessary, and therefore, you know, we are extremely excited to undertake this endeavor. Next slide. If you look at circular economy, next slide as well, there's this, you know, ideal that everything is circular. But what we try to add here is that even if everything is totally, let's say, with a closed loop and resources are traceable and, you know, everything is decomposable, then still it may not add a lot of value. And this is obviously kind of controversial image because, yeah, we have a grenade here. And that grenade is obviously, well, useful. Some may agree, some may disagree whether or not you should have an industry that creates grenades, but it's not necessarily creating value for all. And that is just to illustrate. The next product is a shoe, a sports shoe made from fishing nets that were generated in the ocean that may alleviate chemical pollution and, you know, have usage and then kind of a circular shoe as a consequence, but the circular shoe itself can create another problem that is microplastics in nature, again, chemical pollution. So you actually create a new problem from an old problem, and that's not truly valuable. And again, if you have an overarching impact framework and look at the ultimate value, we believe the circular economy choices will be better and will be ultimately contributing to value creation.
Yeah, so basically what you're saying here is that circular economy is an important topic, but you should never look at only a single topic. It's always a set of topics. It's always a set of impacts. Circularity is important, climate is important, pollution is important, human rights is important, etc. So if you have the circular hand grenade, maybe circularity okay, human health, not quite okay. Fishing net shoes, maybe circularity okay, pollution not okay. So always look at the lens of impact. Always think beyond. What am I really contributing to the total amount of welfare?
And the nice thing is that in the CSRD, that is the upcoming or kind of the regulation that has been adopted and the standards that are currently drafted and very likely to be adopted, there is also this integrated approach. So as part of the circular economy and resource use disclosures, you need to show the linkages between the different kind of impact indicators. So even impact on local communities is part of it. Even climate impacts, pollution impacts, they are all part of this kind of set of disclosures that companies are required to give. What you see here also is that, unfortunately, this year the circularity of the world was estimated not to have improved. So we unfortunately still have 7.2 circularity in the world, meaning more than 90% of all the materials are burned, put to waste, and end up in landfills, which is obviously insane if we talk about this so often. So, you know, we really have to have a sincere and thorough approach to this. And for the Netherlands, the still standing number is a little bit less than 25% of circularity. So 75% of the economy isn't kind of circular according to standards. And then finally, slide on what we have seen by the Dutch Ministry of Infrastructure, Water and Environment, is that true pricing, the true price of products is becoming a thing, actually. There's two concrete places in that plan, the Circular Economy Program 2023-2030, and this illustration of a textile product, a t-shirt, shows, well, the logic that if you actually integrate or internalize the environmental costs due to uncircularity, due to, for example, toxic waste, then you will actually have an economy that works for sustainability. So there's a very nice link, and we're happy to see that the ministry has adopted this language. Obviously, there's still a way to go before this, for example, is translated into fiscal arrangements and truly incentives that drive circularity. But, you know, we're making steps in terms of progress.
And it's not too weird. Huh? It's basically a other way to frame the polluter pays principle. So if we buy the sweater that is on the screen, we pay a bit, but nature pays a bit, and poor communities pay a bit. And we don't want that. And the polluter pays principle says the polluter pays. So we pay for those nature costs, and we use that money to remediate those costs and to make sure nature is as good as before we bought that sweater. And same for local communities. True pricing is basically the sound logic, the polluter pays, and we use that money to make the world a better place, or at least as good a place before we started not paying.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much, Michel. And we are talking about circularity, but we are also part of Impact Institute. Yeah. So how can we see this in terms of impact, and also what are the implications for professionals working on circularity who have to report on the CSRD directive as well?
Yeah. Thanks, Antonia. So basically, what Michel has shown you so far is that we should care about impact, and we should care about circularity. And well, the number in the Netherlands is a bit better than the number worldwide. We're still not there, but there is a number of frontrunners, and those companies have been sharing their message actively, of course. Those companies have always been proud. And for those companies, I would say it's second nature to report on impact and circularity. But think of the large group of companies in the middle and the large group of companies at the tail. They don't report, because why would they? And also, for me as a consumer, okay, those front runners I can recognize, but how do I know whether a company is in the middle or a company is in the tail if they don't report on it? And if I can just have one message that resonates with you, it's that reporting on sustainability is no longer optional. It's no longer the case that companies can decide themselves, yeah, I may want to report on it, or no, I don't want to report on it because I'm afraid it looks bad. Reporting on sustainability, including on circularity, is becoming the norm and is becoming compulsory.
And one more thing is really that is completely expected to disrupt the market and accelerate the digital impact economy, is that there's also, as part of the CSRD, a digital information protocol that you need to meet. So the information needs to be expressed in a format through which, and that is another kind of regulatory package, the single European point of a single European access point, there's kind of this information database for financial and non-financial information that will be phased in the years ahead. So expect to have basically, you know, radical transparency on impact. So really, this is expecting to accelerate the digital impact economy in massive pace.
And that's what I like. That's one of the things I like so much about CSRD. Here, a slide, the evolution on regulation, and it started already a couple of decades ago with GRI, the Global Reporting Initiative, which basically urged companies to report on biodiversity, on tax, waste, emissions, diversity, equality, health, safety, all those topics on a voluntary basis. So companies, roughly speaking, companies that thought they were doing good were applying GRI. All the other companies, it was not compulsory. And recently that has changed with the NFRD, the Non-Financial Reporting Directive, which obliges companies, or at least the largest companies, to report. And that's a good thing. But it becomes even better, because the next step is the CSRD, which A, applies to more companies, and B, has a new look at what actually is important topics that I need to report on. And I show that on this screen. So yesterday, what companies cared about were dependencies. So most reporting was towards the shareholders of companies. they wanted to know, okay, last year I got a nice share of dividends. Will I get so in the next year? And you need to tell me the risk of your business and the opportunities for me to assess whether this company will remain profitable in the future. And of course, it does relate a bit to circularity. So for instance, if we expect price shocks or if we expect that materials are becoming scarce, that is a risk to investors. So that is sort of well known already that they are reporting on that, on dependencies. But with NFRD, it's becoming better. They also need to report on what I would call financial materiality. So we see that consumers care about circularity. So if your products are circular, they might buy it better. We see that, for instance, on carbon, there's a large number that have substantial carbon taxes. The EU has a substantial emission trading system. So we see that there's a semicircle on the screen. We see that the impact of you as a company affects society, affects you again as a company. Because if you're not circular, those consumers might run away, which is a business risk. It's your impact leading to a risk. If you're emitting a lot of CO2, that might lead to a tax coming back to you. It's an impact turning into a risk. So overall, I'm happy with NFRD because this matters. But CSRD is one step better. CSRD is really intrinsically about impact materiality. It's about the circular economy and the state of nature that are valuable in and on itself. It's really the arrow from you as a company to the environment that you need to report on. And as Michel mentioned a couple of minutes ago, you need to do so in a comparable way. So you not only need to write a nice report, which, by the way, needs to be integrated with your financial numbers. So it's really those two on equal level. But also you need to give all your numbers in a standardized way so that investors and that consumers can really compare different companies in the same metric instead of having to read all the reports and go over all the different interpretations. Okay, this number is higher than this one. Or is it not because it's something else? Under CSRD, defined set of indicators reported in a comparable way, so we really can start comparing.
And this is what makes it truly unique, is that and I think it's the first time in history that the impact information is hitting the financial reports. And therefore, and hence the title of this webinar, bringing impact or circular economy and resource use in the balance sheet. It's really exciting stuff because right now it's always secondary, it's always second place, and now finally it will become first place, it will become material, and there is a mandatory assurance, meaning that the accuracy and validity of the information needs to be, well, more or less assured, and this is still a limited assurance, which just focuses on, well, the kind of is it a claim that is kind of, to limited extent valid? It's not necessarily the quality of the claim, but still that is really something that will hit home. And also executives and companies, they will be liable. In the Netherlands, it's called an economic delict, economisch delict. So really something to, keep track of, and it's a very promising field. And also for professionals, it's something to enhance their career with. There will be thousands and thousands of professionals needed in this field to make sure that companies not just comply, but also truly make a difference through impact reporting.
About circularity in CSRD, and Michel has printed some nice pages. There's general requirements, there's general disclosures, and then there is 10 subtopics that people need to report on under CSRD. 5 environmental ones, 4 social ones, and 1 governmental one. And E number 5, so the one of the environmental impacts, is about resource use and the circular economy. So there's quite a detailed set of indicators that organizations need to report on. And let's zoom into those a bit. What exactly does the EU and the ESRS require you to report on.
And just one small thing. You may think, whoa, this is an incredible amount of information. There's a lot of documents, but please do just go to Google, Google ESRS, CSRD, find the website of EFRAG, and download these documents. And in particular, the one on circular economy and resource use, just go through it. And also find webinars on this. Really get yourself acquainted with this because it's such a remarkable and also has so much potential for a sustainable economy. It's really things that you can actually master if you just download it and read through it.
Yeah. Maybe before I continue, a short apology. We are shouting all those four-letter acronyms. CSRD, of course, is the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. And basically the documents of CSRD, they're called ESRS, the European Sustainability Reporting Standards. So
and EFRAG is the body that actually was mandated by the European Commission to write this standard. And basically, that is a consortium of, kind of a advocacy organization for the accountancy institutions in Europe.
Yeah. So don't, we'll be using some four-letter acronyms, but don't be scared by them. So what's in there? What is in this document, this E5? There's disclosure requirements. What do companies need to disclose? And there's a set of 6 on the screen. And it ranges from policies implemented to manage material impact. What are your policies? How are you showing that you are actually doing good for the circular economy? All the way to numbers 4 and 5, resource inflows and resource outflows. So what materials do you purchase? What wastes do you produce? What is your value chain? How can you be sure that in your value chain, companies are sufficiently circular, etc. So you really need to crush those numbers and understand your business model. So if we go to the next, we see a sort of I would say a reporting circle on the screen. And it all starts with a materiality assessment on top. You should always understand what's material, what is important of your operations. So there's lots of data that you need to collect, but please do that in a smart way. Focus on those that are the most relevant. So you first do a materiality assessment. What matters and what should I focus on? Then you move on over the circle. So you go to selecting your impact indicators. What are the relevant indicators? You go to number C, impact measurement. You really start measuring. You really start crushing the numbers, digging the numbers, and understand what is my impact on waste, on resource use, on recyclability, etc. And what is the whole set of relevant KPIs that I can report upon. If you have that, you need to have targets. Are my numbers good enough, or would I like to improve? And if you have targets, you need to find improvement levers. How can I reach those targets? And also make an action plan. And then, obviously, it's a circle, so you need to monitor. You need to repeat, and next year you go over it all again. So it's quite a lot that you need to do, and remind, this is only for 1 in the 10 topics. There's 4 other environmental, there's 4 social, there's 1 governmental. You need to do it for all of those. It's a lot, but if you start in time, you should be able to manage.
And if you go back, just to illustrate, one of the, for the 5th disclosure requirement, 37, that is one of the many kind of sub-requirements. The question that you need to answer as a company is the total weight in tons and percentage of materials that come out of the undertaking's product and service production process, including packaging that have been designed along circular principles, durability, reusability, repairability, disassembly, remanufacturing, refurbishment, recycling, recirculation, and also other optimization kind of processes in the context of circular economy. And then again, you're not necessarily required to have then, a total circular kind of product offering, but it's more that you need to express the percentage. And it just looks very ugly if you are having a 0% of your products circular, especially if you make all sorts of sustainability claims.
Yeah.
So that is, I would say, an example of where it comes back. And another very interesting part, and that is in the requirement, that's the 6th article, that's the potential financial effects. Again, there they ask for what is the potential financial risks of your kind of resource outflows and inflows. And for example, what you see is that there's an increasing adoption of, for example, costs for waste processing by governments, and also attribution to companies in particular. So, for example, you are a food chain, you have a franchise location in the heart of Amsterdam, and you have a lot of waste. The municipality will put a extra charge at your doorstep, and that is a financial risk, and you are required to disclose this. So again, this is going quite far, and yeah, you better be ready for CSRD.
Yeah, so that nicely introduces the next topic. What should I start today in order to be ready? And you need to be ready earlier maybe than you think. So we're currently in 2023, and next year, that's a year that companies need to report over. So they will be reporting in 2025, but they will be reporting over the book year 24. And first companies that are in scope of CSRD are the largest companies, are also companies that are already obliged to comply with the NFRD, the Non-Financial Reporting Directive. But that's just the first set. Second year, boom, another set of companies. Third year, boom, another set of companies. Fourth year, fifth year. So on the screen you see all those pillars going up. Every year there's another set of companies. Every year there's a set of companies that is then pushed to report. And all those companies need to be ready in due time.
And what is the estimations of, let's say, authorities or researchers of the number of companies in Europe? I think it's 50,000 or so numbers that circulate. Obviously, it's estimations. It will be depending on how the actual interpretation of this directive will be in the different countries' laws. And in the Netherlands, the estimations vary from 3,000 to 7,000. There's different numbers circulating in 2030. Imagine the number of professionals that need to be educated, that have to speak the language to, well, first of all, comply, and second of all, to use this to truly make an impact.
Yeah, no, it's huge. And you said 50,000. Well, let's say it's 20 people per organization, maybe a few more for larger organizations, a few less for the small organization, but multiply those numbers and we get to 1 million.
That's the goal that we have in the first place. So the number was just, but it's not so strange, huh?
Yeah. So it will be there before you realize what to start today. 3 things. Start prioritizing, start measuring, and know your policies. First, start prioritizing. And I've been discussing materiality assessment for a moment ago, specifically in terms of the circular economy, but going one level above it, basically in terms of ESRS 2, the general requirements. One of the general requirements is to make a materiality assessment of your company as a whole. Which impacts do I affect positively, and which of those is largest? Which impacts do I affect negatively, and which of those is largest? And those really need to be under the looking glass. You need to focus on those. And here on the screen I have an example of Trust, which is an electronic company that we've done a project with recently. And you'll see a lot of bubbles on the screen. And those above the axis are the positive impacts, are positive ways in which they create value for society. And below the axis we see the negative impacts, which is ways in which they unfortunately contribute to the destruction of value. And one of the largest negative impacts of them is material use and non-recyclability, and basically the lack of full circularity already. So for this company, circular economy should already be the #1 priority. And if you don't know what it is, maybe for your company it's also circular economy, maybe it's something else, maybe it's pollution, maybe it's health and safety, maybe it's human health. Do a materiality assessment to find out which should be really your focus over the next couple of years. So 1, know your impacts and know your focus. Moving on. 2, to start measuring. And this is a quite complex flowchart, I'd say, on the screen. It's for a waste management company, Meerlanden, where we did a project together with a number of partners. And of course, the days that organic waste is simple waste are gone by now. I would say fortunately gone by now. It's an important resource, and you can make all sorts of products from it, from key chemicals for the chemical industry to energy, etc. And together with them, we found this flowchart, all the different ways into something that originally we used to call waste is now made into a resource. But it doesn't stop there. So this is just what is happening, but the next question is, how much is it happening? Can we measure? And the answer is, we can. So on this slide, again, we see positive impacts and negative ones. And the positive ones are shown with arrows to the right, and the negative ones are shown with arrows to the left. And although I truly believe that Meerlanden is a company that is ahead of the curve with respect to many other companies in the waste management value chain, there's still lots and lots of negative impacts. And now they measure it, they really know what to focus on. And they really know, well, they can set targets. They can say, well, next year we want to reduce it. They can basically already start playing the CSRD game. And then last step, what you need to do, you need to know your policies. So one of the disclosure requirements, DR stands for disclosure requirements, is how does your organization address the use of resources and the circular economy? How? So how are you transitioning from extraction to non-renewable resources? How are you securing and contributing to regenerative production of renewable resources and the regeneration of ecosystems you are part of? You need to answer those how questions. And very interesting, the question is, there's no way we don't do that. Is that enough? I'd say it's probably enough not to get a fine. But it's probably not enough to get people to believe you. Get people, if we all need to provide our data in a comparable way, that investors and consumers, that they can scan the different organizations that they are investing in or buying products of. And some companies say, no, we don't do anything. That's really, you stand out if you say that. So what you need to do in the next couple of years is to think, do I have a policy? I'd better write it down. Don't I have a policy? Well, maybe I need to have one, because it will be clear in the light of CSRD if I don't have a policy. And I think that is one of the things I am so, I would say enthusiastic about CSRD.
Great.
Moving on.
Thank you so much, Reinier, for these very valuable insights. I think they are very useful, but also show us how much we still need to find out about what it implies for us as professionals. Yeah. And you might be sitting at home or in your office looking at the screen thinking, oh my God, there's a lot ahead. And we understand this, and we understand that this is a challenge not only for you as a professional who might have to implement this within the context of the circular economy, but also beyond that. And not only for you, but also for your colleagues, your team, your employees. So there's a lot still lying ahead of us. And because we understand that this is a challenge for everyone, we also want to see how we can support you. And this is why we are really excited to announce something very special for us. We are also keen to join you on this journey and also support you on the way and support professionals like you to understand better what CSRD implies in your work. So this is why we are thrilled to announce today the soon-to-be happening launch of the CSRD Academy. We are basing ourselves on already our previous experience on impact measurement on the one hand, but also on educating professionals. And we are taking the next step to also support you in this journey. What can you do as a next step? So you will see on the screen a QR code that you can scan. And with this, you can register to join the official launch. This will be online, so you can join us from anywhere. And what's extremely exciting is that you will also get the chance, by joining us, to also win a free ticket for CSRD in 1 day. Mm-hmm. And you might be wondering, what is CSRD in 1 day? Are you guys wondering what a CSRD in 1 day is?
Well, I kind of know.
That's great. So CSRD in 1 day is a learning experience which you can join. It's an interactive one. It happens in person, which is finally possible. Great for us. It will be in Amsterdam at the Impact District in the heart of Amsterdam, Haarlemmerplein 2. That's in Dutch, Haarlemmerplein 2 if you are from the international audience. It's on top of the True Price store, which was opened in 2020.
Okay, that's exciting.
So this will be very exciting to have you on board. We will start our learning experiences in March. So if you are from one of the lucky people who have to report on your numbers in 2024, then you might consider joining us as soon as you possibly can. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can reach us via sending an email to education@impactinstitute.com, or just come by to our office at Haarlemmerplein 2 in Amsterdam. We are always welcoming anyone to come join us. Do you have anything to add? We still have a very exciting part of us ahead, which are the questions from the audience.
I would love to hear whether there are questions, and if so, bring it on. We can see what we can answer or look into.
Great.
Julia, you're at the...
Yes, we have the questions in front of us, and we want to give a special shout out also to our colleagues from the education team and our colleague Julia. She is behind the Q&A session as well. And we have an exciting list. Let's see. The most sustainable product is the product never bought. What kind of role does reducing the demand play? What do you think, Michel?
That's extremely obviously important, and indeed the hyper-consumption culture is what kind of, isn't playing a very constructive role. So I think if you are if you would kind of simulate the implementation of the CSRD, then there is some sort of call it reward for different, for example, business models such as product as a service, in which you would reduce the waste of products, in which you would have a longer, basically you have an incentive, because product as a service is that you, instead of selling a kitchen as a furniture store, you lease it to your customers, and they use it, and they pay for the usage over the years. Mm-hmm. And this is a way in which...
Important point to add, of course, that if you're no longer using it, you give it back, and they take care of recyclability. So
exactly.
It stays their problem. It's not buy, sell, forget.
No. There's incentive alignment between the durability of the product, also in the product design phase. This owner of the kitchen store has an incentive to make the product last as long as possible. Yeah. And therefore, there's this concept of, it in a way reduces the demand, because there will be less new kitchens bought, but it's still very valuable, and it's also something that is kind of valued, because in the CSRD, as I mentioned before, you have to actually also indicate what the percentage of your total products are that are in sync with these circularity principles. So that is just an example, but obviously it is all about mindset, and therefore, again, we find it super important that this CSRD is not just seen as a tick-the-box exercise, or that, on the circularity requirements, you say, well, we don't have a real policy, or, we have a policy, but it's not really, thorough. We really believe it's really about the mindset that you kind of address these societal challenges through business.
No, and one example that you've been given before. Do you know how often people wear a piece of clothing before they discard it?
Yeah, that's unbelievable. On average, maybe it's less than 10 times.
I believe it was 7 times. And so one of the other initiatives here at the Circular Economy Week is mud jeans. It's a jeans that you lease, and you pay for it as long as you regularly wear it. And if you don't, you send it back. I was looking here at one of those disclosure requirements, and you're really asked to report on, well, Michel quoted it, the total weight, but it has a number of subs. Durability, does it live long? Reusability, can it be reduced? Repairability, can it be repaired? Etc., etc. So it's really about putting your products in this view of how can we prevent it being used too long.
Yeah, or not long enough, in a way.
Yeah.
Going to waste.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think we can move on to the next question. Rainier, you already talked to us about CSRD and how companies can prepare for the years coming ahead and what that holds for them. People in the chat are asking, what can companies already do now in 2023? How can you start already?
It's doing those things that I mentioned, right? Understand your materiality, start measuring what you can, and start keeping your policy straight. And those documents, those disclosure requirements are public. There's additional guidance coming up, specifically sector-wide, but start dry running already. See if at the end of this year you would make a CSRD report. I can promise you it won't be complete, but will you be at 70% or will you be at 20%? And there will be an eye-opener, and try to get to that 70%, because if you can this year get to 70%, you can next year go to 100%. But if this year you're stuck at 10 or 20%, then you'll have a difficult year ahead.
And I think additionally, what you typically do is a gap analysis, gap assessment. Basically, that starts with what is required, and that is systematically going through these documents. Don't underestimate the time it is needed to just map what is kind of required in the first place. There's organizations that have done this many times. They can help you with it, including ourselves. The second part is, what do we already have in place? So that's important that you already know, like, for example, on circularity, you may already have a good mapping of all the products. You may already have a mapping of all these principles that Rainier was pointing out, and therefore, you may not have to do everything, or maybe certain things you don't have, and therefore you still need to add. But the third thing is that you then kind of see the difference between what's required, what you're doing, and what's then needed. There's many ways in which you can do this, but for example, in an Excel file. And then you can also focus on data that we already have because we report on this already. Or a policy that we already have because we have this already as part of the core of our operation or not.
And something else I would like to add is, I've shown you the evolution of reporting, and it all started with GRI, the Global Reporting Initiative, which was voluntary, but which I like a lot because it really says something about your inherent impact. And like CSRD, GRI has this double materiality perspective. You don't only care because of your financial consequences, but you care intrinsically. And I'd say companies that took the risk to report on GRI, that voluntarily put their hands on the table, said, we are going to do this, I'd say those companies are 1-0, 2-0 ahead now. And that's, I think, how karma should work.
And there's still a big gap. I've heard approximations of 60% or so that they feel that companies who have complied with under the NFRD using GRI, they still feel that they are having to do at least 40% additional and also quite tricky additional, call it metrics and reporting systems. So don't underestimate this.
We have another question as well related to living wages and those being different in different countries. How to go about that?
Rainier, in your...
So it's a valid observation. Living wages are different in different countries. And like a living wage is the wage that one would need to pay a worker not only to meet the legal minimum wage requirements, but to give that person a decent standard of living. Not to be able to buy enough calories not to starve, but to have a good diet. Not only to house him in a house that just suffices, but that meets a set of requirements. Healthcare, etc., etc. And yes, those are different in all countries. And there is good literature on that. For instance, the living wage indicator. There's global benchmarks. I'd say look at those. remember those and start paying those if you can.
And then again, why is this relevant in the context of CSRD? There's this S set of standards,
Yeah.
social standards, and there's also workers in the value chain. And as part of that, there's requirements on, well, it's actually not considered, it's not called living wages, I think it's appropriate wages. Obviously, there's political sensitivity around it, apparently, and they changed this in the previous draft into a different concept, but it basically boils down to the same. And again, indeed, in your value chains, looking at your suppliers, well, that's very challenging, obviously, to map for all your suppliers the wages paid in comparison to what's required to fulfill the conditions that Reinier just set out, food, non-food, and housing costs. For a family, for a household. But, and again, there's also existing databases. And I think that's another point. We see the same for circularity and kind of linked ease to circularity, such as biodiversity. Yep. I mean, this is such an overwhelming request by the Commission that that it's very likely that companies do not have this data and won't have this data in the coming years for their own value chain. Well, you can work with data providers. There's also in circular economy specific data providers that anticipate on the adoption of the CSRD and therefore, well, we'll tailor it to your demands. At the Impact Institute, we have the Global Impact Database, with which we help organizations with, well, the kind of outside-in estimates. So based on where you have your suppliers in which countries, or where you have your kind of plans when it comes to, for example, production of furnitures, whatever kind of example you can think of, you can work with outside-in data, with proxies to make estimates of, well, degrees of circularity, types of waste, degrees of pollution, but also living wages and living income gaps. So there's data available. And the nice thing is that the Commission has, or the proposal is that if you do not have data, they allow you to have 3 years to work towards having that data, and also that they allow for these types of rough estimates.
Great. Thank you so much for your contribution also to this question.
Good question.
We have some more coming our way as well. Looking at sectors, if you look at the different sectors that would have to comply with CSRD, which ones do you think would have the hardest time and face the biggest challenges?
It's an interesting question. Maybe important to note that in 2 times in spring and summer, next to this set of documents that the EU has already published that are sector agnostic, they will also provide additional sector guidance, so specific guidance on how to fill those indicators for, I believe, 2 times 10 sets of sectors. So let's first wait for those questions before we are giving a bit more certain answer. My initial answer would be simply sectors with a very long and complex value chain. So let's compare, for instance, I don't know, a apple from a organic farmer in the Betuwe to the phone I bought a couple of years ago from a international manufacturer. Like that apple is grown in one place. It may has a few suppliers to it, like it needs water, it might need a few chemicals, it might need seeds. The labor is
organic doesn't have chemicals.
Organic, well, does have, but less.
Good one, yeah, less.
So I say for that one, you understand what's going on. What went into this phone? The answer is I don't know. It has, I believe, 1,000 components. Each of those are bought from a supplier that have suppliers and suppliers and suppliers again. And Michel already briefly referred to the social standards. And one of the social standards is workers in the value chain. So you need not only know something about your own workers, you also need to know something about the workers in your value chain. If your value chain is simple, it's okay. If this is your value chain, yeah, I think step number 1 is mapping your value chain. Find all your suppliers and get as much information as you can on their suppliers.
And yeah, that's I cannot disagree. I agree.
Yeah.
One more question.
Yeah, very interesting one as well. Speaking of challenges, so we spoke about the challenges in terms of sectors. Now let's talk about the challenges in terms of the size of your organization. There are also smaller organizations. We see that the question is framed more as how you can start reporting on sustainability. If you're a smaller organization with limited resources, maybe we can look at both the sustainability part, but also under CSRD.
Maybe, I mean, as smaller organizations, you have more time, so you can prepare longer, and that is an advantage because, just make the same kind of approach, but you have more time. So, well, on average, you can have less resources dedicated to it, which, fits the smaller size. Still, I think try to pool resources with peers. I think that's important. So work in a community. We try to kind of pool resources as well with Impact Institute, with our CSRD in one day. We look into how can we make professional joint forces. Yeah. Because it's basically the same question, same type of questions for the same type of companies. Mm-hmm. So if you can somehow join forces, learn from each other, have templates of policies, have templates of CSRD project management flows. There's so many things that you can actually replicate and jointly develop and use. So I think that is important. Pool resources.
Yeah, maybe if I can add to it 3 things. One is believe that it is possible. In the slides that Michel has shown on companies that we've worked with, for instance, there's Bakkerij van Vessem, which is a smallish bakery in Haarlem and surroundings.
150 employees.
Yeah, so it's
15 locations.
It's an SME, and they can do it because they care. But what they did, and that's the second point, they've been very specific. So I've briefly shown you a materiality assessment of trust, which is, I would say, is also a medium to large company. It's not huge, but the first thing they wanted to do is understand their impacts and their relative sizes. So if you're small, I wouldn't say go for everything all at once, but find out what is your relative largest impacts and focus on those, both in terms of reporting as well as in terms of your improvement levers. And the third element, and that's where CSRD comes in, this is a unique opportunity for you in a sense for those topics that you care about most, find the comparable metrics. You don't need to reinvent every wheel, as to some degree you had to before. There's a very well specified set of indicators. If you have the luxury that you're not forced to comply, you can pick those that you think are most important to you, but you can already try and collect those in a comparable way. And then if you pool resources with your peers and you start comparing that, well, you have nice times ahead, I would say.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you both for all the answers. We hope to have addressed all your questions in the comments. And if you still have any remaining, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at education@impactinstitute.com. You will also now have the chance to still see the QR code again and register for our launch event. We are really excited to see you there, and we really hope to see you there again. You can ask even more questions then if you have any left. I want to thank again Michel and Reinier for joining us today at the Week of the Circular Economy. Thank you again for being part of this presentation. We hope that you enjoyed it, and we hope to see you soon.
And thank you, Circle. Really amazing opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.